All right, let's jump right into this explainer and tackle the foundational frameworks of modern business ethics. For all the business ethics students joining us today, you know this is really where the rubber meets the road. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex web of relationships that define how a business operates, how it governs itself, and ultimately, how it impacts the world around it.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Who is a business actually for? Think about it. If a company is maximizing its profits, does that automatically mean it's being socially responsible, or does it owe something more to society? It's a massive debate that has fundamentally shaped modern capitalism. Are businesses just here to enrich the owners, or are they part of a much larger ecosystem?
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to run through defining the modern stakeholder, the levels of social responsibility, 4 major ethical issues, the role of corporate governance, the executive pay debate, and we'll wrap up with a roadmap for actually implementing stakeholder perspectives.
Okay, Section 1, defining the modern stakeholder and understanding exactly who holds the power.
To really get into this, we first have to establish who exactly has a claim or a stake in a company's outcomes. First up, we've got primary stakeholders. These are the folks whose continued association and resources are absolutely critical for a firm to survive. We're talking about employees, customers, shareholders, and even the local governments and communities that provide essential infrastructure. The takeaway here, without these primary groups, a business literally ceases to exist. Earning their engagement and trust isn't just nice to have, it's entirely non-negotiable.
Then, on the flip side, we have secondary stakeholders. Now, these are groups that aren't typically doing direct business with the company, and strictly speaking, they aren't essential for its day-to-day survival. Think about the media, trade associations, or special interest watchdog groups. But here's the catch. Secondary groups still wield immense power. They can completely shape public perception. Like, remember when major advertisers pulled out of a massive video platform because of offensive content? That is the sheer power secondary stakeholders have. They can force massive changes in business practices just by threatening to withdraw critical resources.
When you map all this out, what you see is a dynamic, two-way, reciprocal dialogue between a firm and its entire external environment. It's absolutely not just a company pushing products out in a vacuum. It's a constant, ongoing interaction. A firm influences its stakeholders, sure, but those stakeholders push their values and standards right back onto the firm. We call this the stakeholder interaction model, and it's proof that business ethics is, without a doubt, a team sport.
Moving right along to Section 2, levels of social responsibility and how we move beyond just the bottom line.
Social responsibility is all about an organization's obligation to maximize its positive impact on society while minimizing the negative. And we see a real philosophical showdown here. On one side, you have the classic shareholder model, famously championed by economist Milton Friedman, arguing that the sole mission of a business is purely to maximize profit. But on the other side, we have the stakeholder model. And honestly, what's fascinating is that this broader, more inclusive view actually traces all the way back to Adam Smith, one of the founding fathers of capitalism. He deeply believes that the common good involves producing for the happiness of mankind and balancing the interests of everyone involved.
So how do we actually measure this responsibility? Well, think of these 4 recognized levels kind of like a pyramid. Economic performance, actually making a profit, has to be the baseline foundation for any business. But true corporate citizenship, that requires building on top of that base. It demands rigorous legal compliance, ethical actions that go way beyond what the law strictly requires, and finally, right at the very peak, voluntary philanthropic contributions where the company is actively giving back to the community. You absolutely have to build on that economic foundation if you want to achieve true corporate integrity.
Let's hit Section 3, 4 major ethical issues, or what we like to call conflicts in the field.
Theory is great for the classroom, but how do these conflicts actually play out in the messy reality of the real business world? Well, these 4 areas basically represent the major battlegrounds of business ethics today. First up, social issues. Think about protecting user data privacy in our modern era of big data and AI. Second is consumer protection. This involves fighting unfair practices like deceptive native advertising that tricks consumers. Third, we have sustainability, which means recognizing the natural environment as a vital stakeholder itself. And finally, corporate governance, which ensures we actually have the internal systems in place to keep companies accountable.
Which flows perfectly into Section 4, the role of corporate governance, which is all about formalized responsibility.
This right here is the formal control mechanism. It's the guardrail that prevents executives from straying into unethical territory. We define corporate governance as the development of formal systems of accountability, oversight, and control. In public corporations, the board of directors holds the ultimate authority. And these directors act as fiduciaries, meaning they are quite literally placed in a position of trust. They're bound by a duty of care to make fully informed decisions and a duty of loyalty to put the organization's interests above their own personal gain. They are legally obligated to prevent ethical misconduct from happening on their watch.
And unfortunately, we have seen the catastrophic fallout when a company's leadership and culture completely fail to protect its stakeholders. Just take a look at this quote from the current CEO of Wells Fargo, Charlie Scharf. He's referring to their infamous fake account scandal, where employees were opening accounts without customer permission. The previous leadership totally failed to maintain an ethical culture, focusing purely on bottom-line results and padding their personal compensation. It's a textbook example of exactly what happens when governance mechanisms fundamentally break down.
Next up, Section 5, the executive pay debate. This is the classic tension of reward versus responsibility.
This topic always brings up a really tough, uncomfortable question. Is a vastly overpaid CEO acting unethically, even if the company is highly profitable? The hard data comparing CEO pay to median worker pay is honestly staggering. We are seeing massive pay disparities, with some ratios hitting 1,085 to 1, or 934 to 1. That means the CEO makes in one day what a median worker makes in years. Naturally, this has become a massive flashpoint for shareholder activism. Stakeholders are heavily scrutinizing these compensation packages, asking point blank if anyone is truly worth millions in salary and stock options, while the average worker makes just a tiny fraction of that.
To put that into perspective for you, the U.S. median CEO to worker pay ratio currently sits at roughly 273 to 1. So why on earth is it so high? Well, a major driver is a practice called peer group benchmarking. Essentially, compensation committees look at what other CEOs in similar companies are making, and they decide to either match it or beat it. It acts like a perpetual motion machine, constantly inflating salaries across the board. Because of this runaway effect, many stakeholders and shareholders are now fiercely demanding that executive pay be strictly linked to actual, measurable performance targets.
All right, final section, Section 6, implementing stakeholder perspectives. Let's look at a practical roadmap for action.
Okay, we've identified the frameworks, we know the challenges, but how do you, as future business leaders, pragmatically implement a stakeholder orientation in the real world? It doesn't happen by accident. It happens in very specific steps. Phase 1 starts with assessing your corporate culture. You have to audit your existing values and your mission. Step 2 is identifying your stakeholder groups, literally mapping out exactly who holds power and legitimacy over your firm. Step 3, identifying stakeholder issues. You have to figure out exactly what specific concerns those powerful groups care about most, whether that's sustainability, fair pricing, or human rights in the supply chain.
Then the final phase involves taking actual action. Step 4 is rigorously assessing your organization's genuine commitment to these issues. Step 5 is identifying resources and determining urgency. You have to allocate your money and time to the most pressing challenges. For example, when Apple faced intense public backlash for intentionally throttling the batteries on older iPhones, they had to urgently allocate resources to offer discounted battery replacements and update their software for better transparency. And finally, Step 6, gaining stakeholder feedback. You do this through surveys, media tracking, and direct engagement to ensure you're actually hitting the mark and meeting their expectations.
Which leaves us with this final thought. As you transition from the classroom into the boardroom, the ultimate challenge is sitting squarely on your shoulders. How will you lead your future organization to balance the need for profit with the incredibly complex, evolving needs of your stakeholders? Because, as we've seen, it's really not just about making money anymore. It's about leading ethically, responsibly, and sustainably. Keep that in the back of your mind as you step into your future careers. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.